This is Rob Morse of the Self-Defense Gun Stories podcast. I'm reminding you that this podcast is one of the many good ones on the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, President of the Non-Threat Assassination Squad, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. This is a podcast about the men and women who compete in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. Now, I've been attending IDPA matches since 2011, and over the years, I've met some really amazing people thanks to this sport. Ignore all the colorful jerseys and the sponsor logos, and underneath you're going to find everyday men and women who volunteer their time and their effort and spend their hard-earned dollars on travel, match fees, and gear to make this sport great. And today you're going to meet another one of these awesome people. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor. Before we get started, let me tell you about GlockTriggers.com. Love them or hate them, the one thing you know about Glock pistols is that they are reliable. Out of the box, to the range, absolutely reliable. It's what makes them so popular with competitors, law enforcement, military, and responsible armed citizens. But one of the drawbacks is that stock trigger. Well, Jeff Wilson and the folks at Glock Triggers asked themselves, how do we make them better while maintaining reliability? Using stock parts as their foundation, they've refined the interaction of the metal parts to give you smoother take-up, a cleaner break, and reduced overtravel without sacrificing safety or reliability. Recommended and used by people like Bob Vogel, Travis Haley, and Ken Hackathorn, Glock Triggers custom trigger kits come with a lifetime warranty and a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. Visit them today at glocktriggers.com and check out the Edge, the Vogel, the Skimmer, the Guardian, and the Hackathorn trigger systems. Use the promo code from this podcast, USC20, and save 20% off of your entire order. glocktriggers.com, the highest quality drop-in trigger system for your Glock. Our special guest today is Scott Martin from Grand Junction, Colorado. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lloyd. Glad to be here.
So tell us a little about yourself and what you do for a living there in Grand Junction.
The last question first. I'm currently retired, so my retirement job is I'm the president of the Action Pistol Group here in Grand Junction. Our home range is the Cameo Shooting and Education Complex, where we sponsor currently 4 action pistol sports with IDPA, USPSA, just started Steel Challenge, and we're going to have 3 gun matches starting up in July.
Very nice.
So that's what I currently do. My background, I guess, is I kind of grew up as an Air Force brat back in the 50s and 60s. My dad was a B-52 pilot. He also was in World War II, Korea. And so I grew up on Air Force bases. In that time, I was really not involved in shooting at all and didn't really have much to do with guns at all. My dad retired and sadly passed away shortly thereafter. And so at age 16, we had moved up to Washington State to where I went to high school and college and to live next to some other family. But eventually the rest of my background was I graduated from college, just didn't totally know what I intended to do. So I joined the Air Force and got a pilot slot, went to pilot training down in Del Rio, Texas by the sea, and ended up of all the airplanes to get, I really wanted to be an airlifter, but I was fighter qualified. And so they said, this is a good guy for a B-52. And so
following in Dad's footsteps.
I did. I followed in my dad's footsteps in the Air Force. I had 2 tours in B-52s at March Air Force Base and K.I. Sawyer. And when I wasn't doing that, I got called back to Air Training Command, and I was a T-37 instructor at Lubbock Air Force Base, and then again in San Antonio, I went to a pilot instructor trainer. I trained people how to be instructors, and then finally finished my career at headquarters there doing base closure.
Very good. Well, thank you for your service. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lloyd. I appreciate that too. After that, I retired from the Air Force and went to work for USAA for another 10 years as an underwriter and a property casualty rep, and then ultimately we moved to Grand Junction, Colorado, to be closer to family. And my wife and I was 55 at the time. My wife and I were going to be just recreating and enjoying Colorado, and after about a year of that, she said, "You might want to go do something." And so I went for another 8.5 years working for a Texas company called VALIC, the Variable Annuity and Life Insurance Company. I retired from them and to be the president of Action Pistol Group and basically to run action shooting sports here on the Western Slope. Very good.
So the wife just decided, you got to get out of the house. You got to find something to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 9 months, she thought it was going to be fun. But after 9 months and doing projects, it's like, it was a nice life. You get up and you read the paper and you mouse around on the computer and go for a hike. And then I'm still there. So it's like, right. Yeah, you might want to go to work.
So where did the interest in competitive shooting come from? How did you get involved with the action shooting group? What was your original introduction to competitive shooting?
Okay. Well, kind of my action interest in shooting, I guess I'm going to go back quickly to the Air Force and say, I had to qualify every 4 years with the pistol when I was in the Air Force, and I thought that was fun. We had been living here for about a year, and in the fall of 2008, when President Obama got elected, and I was reading all over the paper that the gun stores were mobbed and, ammunition was flying off the shelves, I thought to myself, I probably should go get a gun before I can't get one anymore.
Right.
And I hate to say how dumb I was, but I literally called my brother, who was an NRA life member, and I said, "John, I want to go get a gun. What kind of gun should I get?" And he said, "You should get a 9mm." And I said, "Okay, I will." So I went and stood in this huge crowd at Sportsman's Warehouse. When I finally got up to the counter, I looked at the guy and said, "I want a 9mm." And
I'm sure his reaction was priceless.
Exactly. He goes, "Well, what kind?" I said, "I don't know. I want the best one up there." And he goes, "Well, a lot of people like this Springfield XD." And so I said, "Okay, I'll take that one." And so I walked out of there with 3 magazines and a plastic mag holder and a plastic holster, and everything was looking good. And I'm like, okay, now I got to find somebody to teach me to shoot it. Mm-hmm. So I found a gun club in town that I took the class from. I didn't end up sticking with them because they didn't impress my wife too much, but because she took the class too, by the way. I had got a 22 for her. But at any rate, so I ended up, I got my concealed carry permit. I had a gun, and I was like, well, okay, now what do I do? Where do I go shoot this thing? So sadly, my mother-in-law turned in front of a pickup truck with a cattle pusher on the front, wrecked her car, and I ended up, my wife said, "Would you please find a way to dispose of the car?" I did. I took it to a junkyard and found an old guy, and he had a gun store hat on. And I asked him, I said, "Where do people go shooting here?" And he said, "Well, check." He gave me the phone number of a guy, which I checked out, and he directed me to the Whitewater shooting range, which is nearby. And I shot my first IDPA match there in the summer of 2010. And I thought, with my Springfield XD, and so I just thought it was great. I loved it. And so I shot a few times, and then one of the people came up and said, "You're fairly decent. How about if you consider being if you want to join this range, you have to take this class from Action Pistol Group." And I did that, took the class, and And then they said, well, hey, you're pretty good. How would you like to be an instructor? And so I said, okay, I'll be an NRA instructor. And so bottom line is I was kind of running an NRA instructor path at the same time I was shooting IDPA. And so that's kind of how I got involved. So, I taught people how to shoot, and I was shooting IDPA.
And I would guess that your years of teaching pilots kind of came in handy in terms of teaching students how to shoot.
I think so. I think so. You kind of learn you can't scream at people. You need to be nice and patient. Make sure they're keeping that muzzle pointed in the right direction. But just kind of calmly approaching people and teaching them the basic skills. And frankly, what I flew in the Air Force as a trainer was a T-37, which is teaching basic skills to fledgling pilots. And so, during that time, we would teach them how to solo the airplane. We actually trained them to the point that they could fly solo on our wing and formation. And that was all in 90 hours of flight. So you learned a little bit of patience and and being on your guard all at the same time.
Right.
So, but I guess further on into the IDPA competition side. So, in 2011, we were going to have a state match, and so we all had to get this classifier done. And so I said I was a good shot, but I didn't say I was fast. And so I did the first classifier, and I was a novice. And so I competed in the Colorado State Championship and won the first place novice trophy, and I really thought that was fun. So yeah. So anyway. But all along the way, I kind of was, I mentioned to you before on the first part of the call that one of my good friends and a person that I got started with in IDPA was Walt Prue, and I kind of always was watching what he was doing, and I noticed he was flying to matches and whatnot, and so I thought, I know it'd be fun. I'd like to fly back up to Washington and shoot an IDPA match up there. Go stay with my brother because it was only 5 miles away.
Right.
And so I went up, but oh my gosh, I had to be I qualified as a marksman. So I took the classifier again. Indeed, I shot marksman, shot up and flew up to Washington, and I didn't do anything special, but I kind of got acclimated to the whole concept of this is happening all over the United States. And so I can go visit somebody and shoot an IDPA match at the same time.
Right.
So I have done that to North Carolina and Washington a couple of times. This year I'm doing it a whole lot more. I flew down to Houston and Arkansas, and I'm getting ready to go to Oklahoma here in a couple of days. But anyway, I basically get a big kick out of that. My brother is like, wow, you're flying to all these places? And I said, yeah, basically when you do that, golf, it's kind of like being a pro golfer in a way. You pay your own money to go shoot in a tournament, and I just don't happen to win any money. So
right. That's a big difference.
It is. So anyway, it's a great. I've enjoyed the sport. I like doing it. I like flying to different places and meeting other people.
And it fits in pretty well with the wife's plan to get you out of the house, right?
It does. It does, exactly.
So talk about all these different matches that you've been to. Is there one that stands out in your mind over the years that you really enjoyed, or you had a really memorable performance, or was really bizarre or frustrating? Some story that you could share with us from over those years?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose a couple of them that maybe happened most recently. One of them was last year I went to the match, the Mountaineer Classic in Boone, North Carolina. I was combining it with a visit to go see relatives there. But the professional golfer had to go out and go do his thing for a couple of days. And so I went, I drove over to Boone to shoot their match, and all my relatives wanted to come watch me. And I'm like, no, please don't. But two of them actually did. But anyway, I went over there, and but I suppose the one thing I would say about that whole stage was I didn't know a soul at the time. The match director at the end said, "Is there anybody who'd like to promote one of their matches?" And I kind of like started to raise my hand, and then went, no, I don't know anybody here. But he saw me, and he points me out, and he goes, go ahead. And I just said my name, and the fact that we were the Cameo Shooting and Education Complex was hosting the first state match at a world-class range, and we just like to invite people to come out and shoot it. And when I said that, the crowd kind of chuckled a little bit about going out to Colorado. But then Alex and Bob Frank walked up and said, "Hey, we're coming to your match." So that was kind of a good memory.
Yep. And Aaron Burles, who was squatted with you, I'm sure would he travels all over the country. I'm sure he would not have batted an eye at the opportunity to come to Colorado.
Exactly. So he did come. I hope he had a good time, and or I think he did anyway. And hopefully we'll see him back here in the near future. So as far as I suppose the best match that I ever had, as far as performance-wise, was the Colorado State Championship in 2013. I had upgraded to be a marksman at the time, and everybody or many people in our club were shooting CDP at the time, and so I had purchased a Kimber Tactical 2, and that's what I was shooting. And so I SO'd that match as well. And I guess the highlight would be that I shot that pretty well. I ended up beating 15 people and got bumped to sharpshooter, where I was like, oh no, I'm never going to win again. But
back to the bottom of the pool.
I know, exactly. So at any rate, but that was probably my best match, where I actually, it was in at least some kind of respectable level of competition, and did pretty well. So now I just kind of keep, provide somebody else a number at the bottom to let them get bumped up to expert now. So
okay, all right. Well, let's play a little pick your poison. You've probably heard this segment with some of the more recent guests, where I thought the questions were getting a little stagnant, and everybody was sort of preparing for these. So I put together a list of sort of either or questions where you got to choose one or another based on your preferences. Now you compete in CDP, CCP, ESP, and SSP. What division did you start out in?
I started out in ESP with the XD.
Oh, that's right. The XD was ESP only. Yeah,
exactly. And then after checking with again, watching what people shot in our club, I decided I'd switch to CDP. So after I won the state match as a CDP shooter, I was like, I'm never really going to win again. So I had purchased a Glock 19 that I was starting to carry, and I thought, I'm going to just start competing with this. Oh, I'm only a marksman in this. So anyway, I competed in CCP for a number of years, and then I purchased a Glock 34 from my dentist, who is also an excellent shooter, and it had a Glock trigger in it. So and actually, I know Jeff Wilson because he used to live up here as well. So my Glocks do have Glock triggers in them, and they do make all the difference. So once I had a 5-inch barrel, I shot that gun pretty well. And so that's what I currently compete in now. I'm back to ESP because my backup gun for that would be an ESP as well. And so it has a mag well and a few things on it. So that's why I compete in ESP.
All right. So if you had to choose out of the 4, which one, and you couldn't shoot any of the others for the rest of let's just say for the rest of your life, which one of those is your favorite? Which one would you choose?
I currently enjoy shooting the Glock 34, and because it is so reliable. It goes bang every time. The Glock trigger makes it really sweet. I have a Wilson Combat fiber optic front sight on it, and again, it's just the most accurate gun that I have right now, at least for me.
Okay. Now, if you could not choose any of those four, if there was one of the other divisions and you had to choose one, which one most interests you? Which one do you think you would like to pick up and give a try?
Oh, a lot of guys are shooting PCC in our area, so I would probably it would not be revolver. My apologies to my friend Yoshi Becker. It would not be a revolver. So it would probably be a PCC. But those guys are like bringing rifles to mostly pistol matches, and so I guess I'm kind of saving that one for when I get really old to pull out the PCC and start shooting that.
All right. If you have a choice, and a lot of times you don't, but if you had your druthers, would it be would you shoot standards first stage of the match or last?
I would shoot standards last. I like to be warmed up. Especially before, if some guy puts a target out there at 45 or 50 yards. I like to be a little bit warmed up before shooting standards.
Yeah, that would make a difference if you have a 50-yard shot, 45, 50-yard shot first stage of the match. That would be, that would make a big difference.
Exactly. We have, at our next big match that's coming up, which is the Rocky Mountain Regional in less than a month here at Cameo. For anybody who hasn't signed up, it's still some open slots. One of our standards are out there kind of far. So the ranges are 50 yards deep. They might be somewhere close to that. So.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of long range shots, if you had your choice, would you prefer a wide open targets, no barriers, no non-threats at say 20, 25 yards, or everything really close, say 10 yards, but lots of non-threats?
I like the challenge of the non-threats. I like the using cover and the challenge of the non-threats. One of the reasons that IDPA was appealing to me as I developed as a shooter was the fact that we were teaching the similar skills in the NRA concealed carry classes, and so ultimately, it's for defensive shooting. I just like that part of it more.
Okay, Glocker 1911. Just kidding.
Currently, I'm picking the Glock. Half the group out there is groaning at that moment.
Right. Would you prefer to shoot moving targets or shoot on the move? Which is both of those are tricky skills to learn. Which one do you prefer?
They are tricky skills to learn. If I have a choice of shooting on the move or shooting a moving target, I probably would shoot on the move. To be real honest, the hardest thing for me is the swingers. Turn and drops aren't are pretty good, but I'd rather keep my feet moving and shoot on the move.
Right. You shoot all over the country, so you've experienced weather at its worst and its best, I'm sure. From the sweltering summer in North Carolina to, I'm sure, more moderate temperatures in Colorado and sticky weather here in Texas. Which would you prefer, cold weather or really hot? Would you rather shoot in 30 degrees or triple digits?
Triple digits. I would have said I like to shoot in the heat until you said triple digits, but I will stick with hot. I prefer to not have a lot of heavy clothing on that I'm having to deal with. I did shoot the Arkansas match in the cold rain, as you know, a month. Well, is it a month ago now?
Almost.
Nearly. Yeah, it was that was something where you couldn't take your rain gear off, and that was something. I didn't particularly care for that, and it was cold. So I'd prefer the hot, and I would just pull out my big hat and get some sunscreen.
All right. So which of these rule changes do you think had the biggest impact on your game? The 1 second per point rule, or being able to reload in the open?
I liked both rule changes, but I would say the 1 second per point, putting a premium on accuracy was the one that it had the biggest impact on my game. It's the one I liked the best, because I tended to be a little bit more shooting for accuracy than shooting fast, and so therefore it kind of fell more. And obviously in defensive shootings, if you're shooting for defensive purposes, hits are going to count.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good thing to train to make sure those hits do count. And shooting zeros is more important than shooting too fast and hitting threes
right.
and walking away. So I would say the 1 second rule.
Which part of your game would you say is your biggest strength, and which part of your game needs the most improvement?
I've been hanging around with Walt, and so I would say maybe I'd like to hope my biggest strength is being able to figure out stages to shoot them the most efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that is I don't just walk in there and kind of copy people. I like to figure out what I'm doing, and to shoot it the most efficiently. The most challenging part of my game, to be real honest, still is hitting swingers is a bit more of a challenge for me. That's the one that I probably should just work on. It's not like I don't have access to go set up a target and practice it, but that's probably what I would like to improve on the most.
All right. So as we kind of wrap things up and wind down here, you've been doing this, you fell in love with the sport in, 2010, and you've been flying all over the country to matches. What is it about this sport that makes you want to do that? What is it you love about the game and that keeps you coming back instead of maybe moving on to some other discipline?
Well, I would say that, for one thing, I really truly enjoy competition. My background was not in the shooting sports in the past. I tended to be more of a golfer, tennis player, skier. I was a pretty decent both snow and water skier back in my day when I lived in Washington. So I like the competition, but I also enjoy doing competitive things with people that I like to be around. And I would say that's the kind of the part that I like the best about IDPA. I think one of the things that I would like to mention, I suppose, is the fact that that is kind of as how what we have going here in Colorado and how I play a role in that. The Cameo Shooting and Education Complex was conceived and built, actually designed by Walt Prue, but the concept for it was thought about well in advance of that, and I kind of got in the ground floor of the planning of that, and I think my biggest strength of what I'm bringing to IDPA right now is the organization of the shooters in our club. To basically, a year ago at this time, we were a little club that had never put on a state match before. The other state matches were put on by other clubs. Cameo was built. Walt was selected as the director, and we had a meeting. And 60 days prior to the actual match, we said, "Can we do this?" And we said yes. And so, in basically a 60-day period, we put together a state match where our equipment and everything else was over at another range, and the bays had not yet been finished completely. And I suppose I was kind of I served as the assistant match director, as I am going to for the 2 IDPA matches here that are coming up. It was a highlight for me to have the Wilson Combat Shooting Team come to our range. Joyce Wilson came to Cameo to see what we had put on, and we were humbled that with the fact that she was impressed enough to say that we were going to be hosting nationals in 2020. And so I just would like to do a shout out, if I can, to all the people in my club, Laura Walters, Jeff Melchior, and many others, Walt and Austin Prue, who basically moved heaven and earth to put on a heck of a match last year. And as a result, we're going to hopefully be putting on many more of them in a gorgeous Colorado Valley near Grand Junction in the future.
Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And again, thank you for your service to our country. And thank you for taking the time to come on the show and being a part of it. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in Oklahoma.
All right. Sounds great, Lloyd. Look forward to seeing you then.
All right. That's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guest for coming on the show and our sponsors for making all of this possible. Take a moment, if you would, to check out the website, check out our show notes at unloadpodcast.com. We've got lots of interviews with more amazing guests like the one you heard today. Join our Facebook group at unloadpodcast.com/Facebook for all the latest updates and to connect with other fans of the show. And if you'd like to support the show, we sure would appreciate it. Consider becoming a patron at unloadpodcast.com/extra. I've got some full-length interviews and special content available there exclusively for patrons as well. And if you know somebody or you yourself would make an interesting guest for a future episode of Unload and Show Clear, please contact me at lloyd@unloadpodcast.com or click on the contact page on the website and send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in again next time for another episode of Unload and Show Clear.